are at Chapter 6, where you'll get the opportunity to work with variables. Now in this chapter, you get to know what variables are and how they work. You're going to learn about the different types of variables and how you can use each of those types. And you'll get a chance to practice naming and declaring your very own variables. You'll get to see how to set and use a variable's value later in your code. It's time for us now to learn about variables. So when you write a program, there's going to be a time when you're going to want to save some data away and use it later. And that's where variables come in. They're a place where I can store some data, whether it's a number or some characters or whatever it may be, and then use them later. Think about variables like a mailbox. If you've ever been to the post office, which is something we don't usually do very often nowadays, you'll see there are these big banks of mailboxes. And they have different sizes, they have a number on the front of them. Well, variables are kind of like this. There are different sizes, there are different types, and within, if you were to open the little mailbox up, there's an envelope in there or a package in there. It's kind of the same with variables. So let's continue this thought about mailboxes. Like a mailbox that has a number on it, a variable has a name, and we get to choose what that name is in most cases. It has a type, that's how big it is, or how small it is, the kind of things that you can put in it. And then it actually has a value, a package or an envelope, if it's a mailbox, a number, a name, a date, any of those types of things. There are a lot of different types of variables. Here are some of them. An int, which is an integer, stores numbers that don't have a decimal point. A float, which is also a number, but it has a decimal point. A double is also a number with a decimal point, just bigger. A string, we'll be using some of those. We used some in our output example a chapter ago. They have characters, they can have numbers, that kind of thing. What we call a char or a car is only stores a single letter or a single number. And then Boolean. Boolean stores either true or false. You get a chance to use these throughout the chapters. Now, the first thing we need to think about is naming our variables. Everything has to have a name. And so variable names are case sensitive. So we have to think about upper and lower case. If you name something that's all lowercase, you have to use it all lowercase, or else the computer won't know what to do with it. It can have numbers and letters both. It should always start with a letter. And you should choose clear descriptive names for your variables. First name, phone number, account balance. These are examples of variable names that are pretty easy to understand. I always use a lowercase letter to start, and then if you have different words, you put an uppercase letter at the start of each word, because you can't have a space in the name of a variable. But this makes it so that it's pretty easy to read. So the first thing we have to do before we can use a variable is we have to declare it. Declare it is a way for the computer to set up that mailbox in memory in the computer so we can use it later. I have to tell it what the type is, followed by a space, followed by the name of the variable that I want to call it. So int space my number, semicolon. Or float space my big number, semicolon. All right, so we're going to want to use this thing. So how do we set the value that's inside the mailbox, inside of the variable? Well, I do it this way. I use the name of the variable that I just set, my number equals, and then the value you want it to be, like 10. If I'm using my number, if I'm using my big number, it'll be my big number equals 2.5, semicolon. Now, I don't know if you know this or not, but the reason why we call variables variable is because they can change. So earlier in my program, I set my number equal to 10, but later in my program, I can set my number equal to 20. So the values in there can change. And then I'm going to want to be able to actually retrieve the value and use it. So I would do that simply by referencing the name of the variable in my program or the line of code that I want to go out and grab that and bring it in. We already looked at this in the last chapter when we were talking about output. So let's say we have a line of code that says system out print line, and then in double quotes, the number is colon space. The plus is for concatenation, which is kind of putting things one after the other together. and then my number that goes out and gets the value of my number. Let's say it's 10. And when this line of code executes, it would result in the number is colon space and then 10. We can do the same thing with a float variable. We can do the same thing with all different kinds of variables in our program. I hope you found value in the learn portion of this chapter where we talked about variables. Now it's time for us to try what we've learned throughout the chapter. So we're going to do like we do in practically every one of these try sections, and that is go to our integrated development environment and write a program. So let's go to our project, which I called stuff. You may have called it something else. We're going to right click on source. We're going to go to new, and we're going to go to Java class. And now we're going to create a new class called my first variable program. Remember, so I always start a class name with an uppercase letter. It's important that you write the name of the class in the correct upper and lower case. By the way, I always start a variable name with a lowercase letter, and methods, which is something we'll learn about in a little while, I always start them with a lowercase letter. This is a very standard style for naming the various objects within Java. I'm going to hit enter here. I'm going to hit cancel here. Now, it's created a blank class for us to use. I'm going to hit enter, start a new line. And now we're going to start this class like we do many, many others. Public static void main string. You're going to get really good at typing this stuff since we're just going to do it over and over again. Okay, now what we learned in the learn section was that in order to use a variable, we need to first declare it. And we declare it first by having the type and then the name. So if you remember what we've been trying to learn, thinking about variables as mailboxes, you think about, we've got a box here, and on the side, we've got this word int. That's the type. That represents how big it is and the type of data we can store inside of it. And then across the top, you're going to have the name. So in this case, my number. And then inside the box is the value. So now that we've declared it, before we can use it, we need to set a value for it. And we do this by doing this. Got to type it right. My number equals 10. This sets the value for my number and puts inside that box a number of 10. Now, to use it, we're going to go out and retrieve the value that's in the box and use it. And so we're going to go back to what we learned a little bit in our output chapter, system out print line. And we're going to do this thing that we called concatenation or concatenate, where we take one thing and we add it to another thing, kind of stuff them together end to end. So the first thing we're going to add is a phrase or a string, we call it in Java. Your number is, and we're actually going to put a space right there because that's going to separate them out. And then we're going to put a plus that concatenates. And then we're going to put the name of the variable that we created. And so that goes out and grabs it out of the box, and we'll put it in there when we run the program. So we're ready to run our program. Now, again, just one little check. We need to go over it and make sure that you've spelled everything right. Keep in mind that every time there's an open squiggly brace, there should be a close. Anytime there's an open parenthesis, there should be a close. And then every line that doesn't have a squiggly brace on the back of it should have a semicolon. All right, we're going to come over here, right click, come down to run, and we're going to run our program. And it's going to save it, it's going to compile it, and then it's going to run it. And it's going to display the results. And so the results here are your number is 10. If you got something different than this, if you got some kind of an error, look up in your program, see if there's any red underlines or red exclamation points or anything like that. If you got something that was different than this, just look to see, did you set the value at 10? Does this statement look correct? So we've been able to try to use this variable and to show what the results are. here are some more activities that you can try to learn even more about this topic.